Good morning. I'm Alma Cox. Thanks so much for being here today. I'm reading to you today from my book, Calling Dolores. It's a magical realism novel that I wrote 5 years ago. And yesterday, I posted a video of reading number 1. I'm reading part 1, which is called The Present. And I'm currently on chapter 1, which is called Under a Vintage Light Bulb. And the first chapter is divided into 7 days. And so today I'll be reading day 3 and day 4. I'm so grateful that you're here. And if you are following along and if you like this video, I sure would appreciate a thumbs up. Thank you. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, I generally bring art-inspired content, and I will resume that as soon as I'm done with part 1 of Calling Dolores. This book is about creativity and art, so if you'll stay with me, it will be revealed. Okay, that's it. So thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and begin. And again, I'm reading slowly so that I pronunciate and I'm clear for you. And I have my glass of water. I may need to take a sip. In fact, I'll do that right now so that I'm even clearer. I hope you have a yummy beverage for yourself. Day 3. I am Dolores de Leon, wrapped tightly, sleeping deeply within a penetrable cocoon. My mother, Alma, traces her finger along the transparent box of thick plastic in the neonatal unit of ICU, outlining my larval silhouette. It is a small egg incubating. My tiny lips quiver. Alma turns up the volume to listen to the slow beat of her daughter's heart on the monitor to find a message she may be trying to send. She times her own breathing to the beat on the screen and finds me there in the space between, despite the unnerving noise reminding her she can't hold me, at least not skin to skin. It is only a moment, but we are together on the inside looking out. I might not be a good mother, she thinks, and I'm right there with her. Her memories are embedded in mine. Why do I carry the worst of the past forward? I don't want to, but it's almost like I'm not given a choice. Memory takes us to a small farm called Aguas Calientes, which means hot waters, and is near Mazatlan, Mexico. My mother's 9 or 10, but that never really mattered with so many children. Her chore is the hen house. There are 4 chicks in the corner of a cardboard box under a vintage light bulb inside the bigger coop. But the 5th one is apart, his head lying in the mason jar lid once filled with water. The sawdust is wet all around him, so she picks up his soaked body quickly before death steals him. His head hangs loosely. She feels a faint beat in his chest and quickly draws him to her own, placing him on the valley floor between undeveloped breasts, where he will spend the rest of his 3rd day pressed against her undergarment. She then gathers the eggs from under the hens in the bowl of her dress she has made by lifting the hem with one hand. She looks around for the basket to put them in, but thinks her sister Guadalupe must have taken it to cradle her doll in. The chicks cry. "Let's give you real light," she says to the remaining chicks in the box as she turns off the warming lamp, moves it to the side, and then picks up the box in her free hand. With her hands full, she scoots backward toward the door to call her sister. She takes a big step back. The door swings open, and she is suddenly hit full force by her brother, Rafael, who is running to catch a ball. My abuela, my grandmother, is less than a few feet away, yelling at her sons to stop playing when the eggs fly to the ground. "Idiot girl, you are so distracted," my abuela screams. The next words are automatic, and Alma knows them by heart. "There are 15 reasons why you are an imbecile. Get up, say them." My mother's head hangs low, and on her hands and knees, she moves babies away from broken eggshells and from the wet, cloudy insides spreading over the earth, yolks running like blood. I said, say them. The chicks are lifted into the safety of Alma's skirt again. Por favor, say them. Alma hears Raphael's regret in his whisper, like an apology. My mother gives him a wink only he can see. He has always been an angel to her. My abuela now has Alma by the arm, and she is trying to punish her, her own mother, and all the mothers forever ago. But she is punishing herself, even though it is her daughter's skin she twists with the vice grip of her fingertips, pinching her pores until they are purple. I am undeserving of love from Jesus, Maria. The chicks continue to chirp from her skirt as Alma pulls them even closer and continues to name each person in her family cautiously. Her fingers pause on each lace scallop of her hem as if they are rosary beads, because she is both praying and afraid for all of them. She stops at Rosario, the youngest of her siblings, and for the first time she feels the irony in her sister's name, even though she doesn't have a word for the feeling. There are 15 beads on a rosary, the same number of people in her family, counting herself, her siblings, and parents. She finishes with Madre and Padre, because I am nothing. My abuela smiles righteously and reaches her right hand in the air and brings the back of it swiftly across my mother's face. Alma's head swivels, her body twists under it and falls while holding the babies, and with her chin pointing in a new direction, she opens her eyes to see Raphael lurch toward her to lift her up. With the sun in her eyes, my grandmother squints at her daughter's silhouette while she leans toward her. I'm going to die here waiting for you to become something better. My grandmother emphasizes die and kicks the box toward her daughter as she speaks. I want this mess cleaned before breakfast, which you won't be eating. When she leaves, Raphael moves towards his sister and says, You're bleeding from your lip. In neonatal intensive care, my mother traces the outline of my mouth she has been gazing at through a transparent box, but her finger barely moves. My lips are so small. They have stopped quivering, and Alma whispers, He didn't die, Dolores. I kept him alive, here, close to my heart. It's true. Do you want to know what he became? The biggest, cockiest rooster you have ever seen. We named him Tirano, because he always went after the dogs. Alma is smiling in spite of her crying. They were tyrants, rotten eggs, him and your abuela. She laughs, and because it is rare that she does, I cherish it. I promise I won't be. But before she completes her sentence, I say to myself, I know. I know my mother will do her best with the cruel past she was handed. Alma holds her breath and brings her hand to her chest. She doesn't want to alert the nurses. The ache is getting more intense, the hunger to hold me. She calls on the Virgin of Guadalupe. Whatever happens, Senora, you have sent me heaven in my Dolores. I thank you. Please don't let me repeat the past. But my mother's past will come around a corner one day and catch her off guard, bringing with it a blow to my face that will part my lip and our relationship for 20 years. It will take all I have to not damage my children in the same way. With first love butterflies newly awake inside me, my head will hit a cement wall while my aunts and cousins look on as my mother repeatedly hits my pretty face. You're a liar, she'll scream over and over again as each blow breaks my heart into pieces. Do you think I'm an idiot and don't see? The shame I will feel will make me believe everything good within me is filthy. I'll make it my mission in life to come clean. A beautiful 15-year-old boy with soft curly brown hair French kissed me for the first time. And the lie I told when she saw us, he was telling me a secret, unlocked a vault in her and closed a treasure chest in me when I decided at 13 my mother would not get the best of me ever again. Lucky for me, I didn't lose the key. Day 4. Like I said, my name means pain, so there you have it. It doesn't help that they have me swaddled in all these layers, unable to move. Even though I am small, I am digging my way out of old stories. While some of these other babies seem to enjoy their thick outer coverings protecting themselves from the scary world, keeping them from flailing and feeling out of control, this baby in its bunting is ready to be freed from the heat inside these walls. This little loaf of love is done. I've been watching my life for some time, following it like a trail towards something more. It took me a long time to find the breadcrumbs, and when I did, they weren't even the good ones. From day one, my longing was insatiable. My needy fingers reached for everything my eyes wanted, but they came up continually empty-handed. Everywhere, people had better lives than mine. Even a bologna sandwich on Wonder Bread, I imagined, was made by a better family than my peanut butter and honey on whole wheat. In the life I didn't have, I pictured a stay-at-home mom buying only the best, Oscar Mayer for her princess. Carefully tucking 2 triangles with no crust. In the life I didn't have, I pictured a stay-at-home mom buying only the best, Oscar Mayer for her princess, carefully tucking 2 triangles with no crust in a leak-proof Tupperware container, sealing in all her love for her special girl she had all the time in the world for. She would then braid her hair. My latchkey reality provided me with a foldable plastic sandwich bag, not even a Ziploc promising a good seal. It was too expensive. As far as the PB&H, that was okay, as long as it was crunchy, but I knew the bread was from the discount store, and even worse, from the markdown bin. I whined, but why can't we have Wonder Bread? You can't blame me for trying. Why did I feel like less when we were saving more? All those pennies just seemed to add up to a discounted life. It isn't good for your heart, Dolores, was my mother's response to most of my special food requests, and it then became her pat answer when I asked for things I wished for, like trendy clothes. By the time I knew what she meant, material things will not fill me, I closed the door on my heart's wishes. I felt bad for having desires. But I digress. So there I stood at the red Formica kitchen counter, making my sandwich the night before school, feeling too unworthy to cut it in half, with a glasses half empty attitude, in a short and practical haircut I hated for as long as I can remember. No offense to Olympian ice skater Dorothy Hamill, who my hair was fashioned after. It was convenient for my working mother that my hair be kept short. Since I got a charge out of being hard on myself, like almost my entire life, my 9-year-old self would tell you she deserved the stale crust too. Be grateful for what we have, Dolores. My mother must have said it 1,000,000 times. Of course, it made me feel anything but. I even tried on different personalities as the opposite gender in the hope of creating a new narrator for my life, like the son my father never had. It's not weird. I believed that if I was more boy-like, he'd love me more. He'd finally be happy. I carried his clubs at the 9-hole city golf course during the twilight rate, watched countless westerns, and pulled endless weeds, even though I hated all these things. I fell in that black hole of martyrdom at age 9. The more I did for others at the expense of my happiness, the greater the expectations of me, which gave me more opportunities to please. The silver lining was I received the coveted title of good girl, and we all know she can do no wrong. Well, not until she does, and then she's such a disappointment, getting second place fake silver, which is not nearly as good as fake gold at the 8th grade spelling bee. By this point in my life, fear of failure had grown like an invasive weed. Then for a stretch, I pretended I had an older brother who I named Hansel because I was obsessed with that fairy tale, even though it kept me up at night with worry. I took the cardboard that wrapped around our new refurbished refrigerator and painted it with tempera to look like a candied house. I propped it like a lean-to in our narrow suburban side yard next to an old brick oven while my father planted a barely living live Christmas tree. It came to us free from the same big box store which was my mother's client. I believed it was a pity gift, what with my father out of work again. They must have known. Didn't everyone? In this house, do it yourself means do it or else, my father grumbled as the blade of the shovel hit dry, rocky ground. I thought his general resentment of my mother's client was because he missed her. I certainly did. She spent long hours at work with someone my father called the man, who was, according to him, robbing my father of carpentry work by selling prefab cabinets in every city in America. When he lost many of his clients, who seemingly overnight became do-it-yourselfers, he ranted, "They're trading wood and nails for poison, and for what? It will just seep into their food." He called particle board glued sawdust. On a hardware store trip with him one day, he picked a piece and broke it like stale bread. "This is what my work has been replaced with." He eventually got a night shift job as a security guard in a hospital, which gave him more time in the afternoon to be with my sister Adriana and me. This transition between his self-employment and working a normal job, however, was a nightmare. He lost a job between the two, and I lost my father for a time too. When he couldn't find work for a few months after his carpentry business died, my mother succeeded in helping him get a job with a developer, another of her clients whom she coordinated communication lines for. On what would be my father's last day after 2 weeks of working for him, my father called the man a bigot for giving the Mexicans the shit jobs and underpaying them what was owed to them. Since my father was Peruvian, I really had no idea why he was so angry. He told us during dinner how he walked off the job after he'd carried the man's last goddamn cement bag up the goddamn hill. I cringed. My mother said that every time we used the Lord's name in vain, it kept someone we loved even longer in purgatory. This time, she didn't make her usual sign of the cross. Instead, she coolly stood from the dinner table, took his full plate of dinner, and held it right up to his face. "The man gives us our daily bread," she said, before the food slid off the plate. My father lifted the table as he pushed away from it, causing my milk to spill, and the stew meat relieved itself from his lap onto the floor. Adriana, my little sister, threw food on the table from her high chair as my mother walked away from the mess back into the kitchen. I made sure my sister was belted in before I ran after him. She would be fine, I remember thinking. She was already just like my mother. My mother's yelling after me was drowned out by the engine's roar. "I'm coming with you," I yelled to my father as I hit the truck door. He leaned over to open it. "Get in the house, Dolores. The cold air is bad for you. You need to stay with your mother." Everything in the world, including the weather, was bad for me in those days. "But she doesn't understand," I whined and cried. After all, everyone used the Lord's name in vain. Even my friend Rachel's mom, who was a devout Catholic, said the occasional "Jesus Christ." What was so bad about purgatory, I wanted to know, if we all ended up there together anyway? I wanted my father and me on the same page. I wanted him to agree my mother was merciless. I wanted him to grow a backbone. How could somebody so strong be so weak? Since we moved from our old neighborhood to be near my mother's hateful cousin, Vilma, it seemed my mother's expectations had skyrocketed. I thought she wanted my father to be like Vilma's husband, employed in some awful office job so she could have a 2-story house with a big yard like hers. I was wrong, of course, and came to realize much later that I was the one that wanted that life, the one every friend I had seemed to have. The big house, my own bedroom with curtains my imaginary mother would stitch to match the bedspread. I dreamed of coming home from school and seeing my mother at a sewing machine, the way I'd seen a friend's mom in her house with the smell of chicken soup infusing the air. My mother knew better than I did that my father needed to work to keep his mind and hands busy. For practical reasons, she wanted us near family because I was sick all the time. I could only see how bad I had it. I hated Vilma. Even though Adriana and I had a babysitter a few blocks away, on days that I was sick, Vilma was charged with coming to my house with her youngest twins in tow. In my bed, I dug my nails into my fingertips while I watched her Thing 1 and Thing 2 spin like whirling dervishes through my toys. Once when I told them to stop, Vilma swooped in and shut me up by saying, "Dolores, you are a selfish one, just like your father." I heard how her 2 older daughters were more refined than Adriana and I, how her husband made a lot of money, which was why she didn't have to work, how there was no greater reward than being home with one's children, and what a shame about my family's situation. Vilma said, "Your mother is lucky I'm friendly with your landlord. She could never afford to buy here." As she spoke, I pinched myself under the sheets, drawing blood. The pain counteracted the anger, pushed it away, while a silent frustration took its place. I felt if I could endure the pain, it could have no power over me, and in a sense, it put me in control. In time, I used this method of one-upping the pain for myself in many situations when I believed the world was inflicting hardship on me. I was 8 years old that night my mother dumped the dinner on my father. I got in his pickup truck with him, and we headed toward the Bay Bridge from the East Bay. He returned me home a few hours later, but I walked in our house alone. Before delivering me that night, we crossed the first part of the bridge, and my father pulled off at Treasure Island, and we made our way to Avenue of the Palms, where he parked. I ranted about how I hated my mother, how she didn't care enough to take care of me when I was sick, how other girls' mothers made them soup they carried in thermoses, even the glass kind my mother refused to buy because they were dangerous. She said the thermos could fall and break, and I might unknowingly swallow a shard of glass. He said something about my mother loving me so much, and I said something back about other mothers loving their daughters so much more. I told him he should just stay home with me. We would be okay if he didn't work. We could move back to our less expensive neighborhood. I didn't understand why we had to live in our stupid house next to my stupid aunt. It was freeing to say the word stupid for the first time out loud. I told him I would share a room with Adriana forever, and she could have all my toys if it meant we could have our old life back. He rubbed my back while I coughed in fits, trying to find air between my words in that dense fog. After a while, the coughing finally calmed to a steady, raspy wheeze. "A long time ago, this island was called Yerba Buena Rock," he said quietly. "It wasn't safe for ships. They couldn't see how far the sharp rocks reached until it was too late." His blank gaze on choppy waters silenced me. I knew it well. He had already retreated to that dark, sad place inside himself. He talked about all the rock men had to layer to construct the island. They had to, he said, in order to make it safe for others to cross. A single tear rolled down his cheek, and panic rose in my already constricted chest. Something was coming I didn't want. I was pinching myself hard on the right side of my waist when I reached for the door, but the old handle spun off its track of gear teeth and kept me locked inside. "I'm going away for a while, Dolores." I didn't even understand what that meant, but it felt like the dark waters outside were closing in. He'd never left us, even for a night. He was protecting us from destruction, but the wreckage was already in plain sight. Vilma was right about him. I wished for that treacherous sea to swallow us as I drowned in shame for thinking that. I wanted to knock him out with the door handle in my hand so I could drive him home. Instead, I reached for the key to turn it, even though it was too late to run away from how I felt about him. I overturned the key and the engine screeched. I needed him to snap out of it. Why couldn't he be stronger, bigger, and more ruthless than the pain? My father was sick with post-traumatic stress disorder back when so little was known about it. My mother did her best to keep him busy for good reason, but her efforts were futile given the groundless nature of his suffering. How does one stop a mind that doesn't let up? He didn't have the tools to understand or help himself. I certainly didn't have them either. My father rarely spoke of his military service, but once he told me a story about how, after coming home from a tour in Vietnam, he and other soldiers walked into a diner in South Carolina for a steak and eggs breakfast. The manager pulled my father aside and told him his colored friends could not be served in that establishment. My father warned him that if he didn't serve these men who had bravely served their country, men who would be going back to fight and likely die for this man's freedom, he would single-handedly destroy the restaurant. The manager angrily insisted they leave. My father asked the members of his platoon to return to the base without him. When the police arrived, Tables and chairs had made their way into the parking lot via the windows. Customers had fled, and my father waited to be arrested in the parking lot. He was released a few hours after being in jail. He told me his sergeant said, "I would have done the same thing." I wanted my father's courage to be like that story, larger than life, for us. He reached for my hand and squeezed it. I sat in the bucket seat, defeated, and crying with a deep desperation. I don't remember what I said to my father after he told me he was leaving, but I do remember he promised me he would be back. I felt powerless to change his mind. I remember he said, "It's my fault your mother can't be home with you more." He blamed himself for her having to work so hard and having to carry our family financially and emotionally. To this day, he can't forgive himself for that and for a lot of things. That night, time reared its ugly face and officially ended my childhood. I became its keeper, counting the days until my father's return. Each time I had to explain to someone why he wasn't with us, I lied and said he had important construction contracts in other cities. "Idle hands," I chimed the first part of my mother's favorite quote from inside my refrigerator cardboard confection. My father continued his grumbling and digging while I reinforced my mother's tactic of keeping him busy to abate his melancholy. I was thrilled to have him home, but his absence would repeat itself 2 more times during my childhood and adolescence, leaving me grasping for control over my out-of-control world. Excuse me. I refrained from saying the rest of my mother's saying out loud, "Are the devil's playthings," because just uttering that name was like sending the devil a personal invitation. I peeked outside just in case the red man had appeared, and I breathed a sigh of relief when only the usual demons were haunting my father. They would soon tire out as the tree's root ball took the brunt of his frustration. While I participated in my mother's strategy, I hated that she gave him lowly tasks. Her obvious disappointment in him was unnerving, even though I shared her feeling. She was the man in our family, the breadwinner, and everyone knew it. When he came home 2 months later, I knew she'd lost some respect for him. She stopped feeling sorry for him, which probably did him a favor in the long run. But I saw this lack of caring as her ability to easily detach from someone she loved. And she really did love him, which is why she adopted a strict shape up or ship out attitude. It definitely created another layer of fear for me to contend with. To deal with it, I built shelters for protection in my backyard, and I made tents with my bedding at night, and I acted out the most normal family interactions I could conjure. I behaved myself. But in all my playing, there was always a room beyond a dark corner and fold in my blanket where a witch stirred her pot, readying it to boil me. I made sure to think the worst, so I was prepared for anything. Hansel always rescued me in the end instead of how it happened in real life. I mean in the fairy tale. I get them confused. My strategy for dealing with an inability to help my father created a story where only Hansel could face the witch and do away with her, usually with some magic words only he knew and, strangely, wouldn't share with me. I didn't believe I had it in me to off her, not even in pretend. I took to pulling my hair out, not in clumps, there were rules. 1 strand if I snuck a cookie when they were in the house, which was rare. 2 if I got yelled at. 3 if I had evil thoughts about my mother. One time I was so afraid to be found out because I stole a piece of bread pudding. I stuffed it between the sofa cushions as I heard my mother approaching the living room. I yanked 5 strands of hair for that one, all at once. I forgot about what I did until 2 weeks later when the bread transformed into a living green thing. I broke 15 bones during my childhood, never more than 2 at a time, mainly to avoid free golf lessons the city offered that my father really wanted me to take. Not consciously, of course. My unconscious is a co-conspirator. It knows what I don't want and helps me avoid it, even if it means a summer of swimming is sacrificed. In the meantime, while I learned this, I told myself I deserved to sit poolside, feeling sorry for myself, while my family called me an accident waiting to happen, which seasoned me for a world that was out to hurt me. Kyle, my husband, walks into the room 5 hours after the last time he saw me here with the blackout curtains drawn, writing in bed, before he went to play golf. Are you really still in bed? Are you worse? I'm milking a cold today for all it's worth. No, the dis-ease is gone, I want to say. Something priceless is arising from an unstable childhood. Just sitting here not doing battle with myself for a change, I answer. It's kind of hot in here. Can I open a window? Kyle asks. It's already open, I say. Kyle looks around. His eyes widen and he mouths the word, okay. Don't worry, he's used to me speaking in tongues. I'll go get your straitjacket then, in case you get cold, he says. I giggle as I reach my arms out for him. He sits next to me on the bed and hugs me. Maybe I'll climb in and we can be weekend warriors together, he says hopefully. Yes, good idea. To sum up day 4, 4 decades later, I'm finally letting my guard down. The world is not out to get me. Are you leaving the light on? I ask. I want to see all of you, Dolores. I take a deep breath in. I'm so grateful it's safe to be me. And how I love this man for helping me see this. I know it in my bones. He would never hurt me. And that's the end. And I will resume the next time we meet. Thank you again. Thank you for liking this video if you did enjoy it. And if you haven't subscribed, I welcome you. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.